Welcome, everybody. I am so excited to be here and share with you a topic and a conversation with my dear friend and colleague whom I have been admiring, Mineela Chand. And we're going to dive into a conversation about spirituality during these uncertain times of the pandemic that we are in. So I'm Shirani Pathak. I am author of the book Fierce Authenticity, Show Up, Be Seen, Get Love. And this has been quite an interesting time that we're in. So I'm really excited to speak with my friend whom, like I said, I've been admiring from the interwebs for the past 6 years since I started my business. And Mineela is both a therapist and a leadership coach who has her master's in divinity. She has her MDiv, and it's really exciting that she's hopping on so we can have a brief conversation around the times that we're in. So I'm going to turn it over to you to give you a brief introduction, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, so let me just start by saying that the admiration is mutual. Started reading your book. So far, so good. I've had to put it down because of what's kind of going on right now, and had to, like many therapists, move my practice from in-person to online. So I am a licensed marriage family therapist. And like you said, I have a master's of divinity. So that means I went to seminary, and no, I didn't go so that I could be a nun. For me, the importance was around understanding my own spirituality as a way of understanding other people's spirituality as well. And I also do leadership coaching and more coaching around emotional intelligence and the person of the leader, so that they can not just do leadership as in tasks and skills, but embody leadership. Yeah. So do a lot of training. I love what I do, and I'll probably be doing it for a very, very long time.
Yeah, I mean, the work you do is amazing, and I'm just honored. And I'm going to just roll with what you said about the reason you went to seminary was to get a deeper understanding of your spirituality and the spirituality of others. And I think that's a really great point for us to just dive right into this conversation around just your perspective on, you know, the uncertain times that we're in and how spirituality plays a piece. So let's just open up. Let's just go there.
Yeah. So, yeah, what's happening in the world? It's scary. There's a lot of grieving going on, you know, in terms of very real losses, but also the loss of things that were assumed in terms of how the world functions, right? And the loss of hopes and future dreams, and people, lots of loss around job and everything. And I think spirituality is something that we tend to turn to, many of us tend to turn to when we are kind of in a ditch and don't have any other place to go. You know, we reach out for something in terms of solidity and stability, and spirituality is, I've never really understood why spirituality hasn't been more openly spoken about in therapy and in psychology, simply because out of that comes, you know, what we value, our sense of place in the world, sometimes, actually a lot of times, how meaning that we place on our purpose, you know, and why we're here, where we're going to go after that, how we're supposed to live. So a lot of that stuff is coming up when there's trouble like we're having right now. You know, my clients are asking about, well, what is death and what happens, and I'm scared of this and I'm scared of that, and losing family members, and what does it all mean, right? A lot of people are talking about, this week is Lent, right, as far as the Christian calendar is concerned. So we have Passover coming as far as the Jewish calendar is concerned, and people are kind of talking about, well, what does that all mean? within the context that we're living right now, right? So a lot of those questions are coming up. Deep stuff.
Yeah. And two things that I heard that I want to like just jump in on. One is the aspect of the grief, like so much grief in our collective right now. And the second one is around, and I have a limited knowledge, just whatever we learn in undergrad when you're in a liberal arts, school, and what I know from my friends in regards to world religions and things like that. But there's another part of me that's curious about, any type of spiritual significance or just the symbolism of how we're in this time as we are approaching Easter, which is a time of rebirth and renewal and things like that. So, and we're also in spring in the Northern Hemisphere. So yeah, like those are the 2 points that really stood out for me there. And I'm open to wherever you want to take that.
Okay. So I heard 2 things in terms of grief being the first, and the second being spiritual significance around all of this, and how as far as the grief is concerned, there's a lot here. I mean, it's not just grief, it's complex grief. It's extremely complex. I have some clients that are disappointed at the loss of the assumption of the role of government, so not getting into, a political conversation and everything, but the loss of hoping that there would be some kind of response and support and stuff, because I think the people that are going to be the most impacted will be the poor and those at a lower socioeconomic status, as well as those who are more fragile and vulnerable, right? So there's a loss of that. There's a loss, so much loss. People are losing their jobs. People are losing, their incomes. They're losing family members. It's and even that sense of certainty and safety in the fact that we live in the Western world, right? We are technologically advanced, and yet here we are, laid low by a virus, right? So it's complex grief because it's on so many levels. And then there's all this grief collectively about this large number of people who are at risk of losing their lives, right? And somebody was talking to me about how that number is bigger than those lives that were lost in the Holocaust, right? So it's like 1%, but at the same time, this is like a huge, there's a loss of freedom, so it's very complex on all kinds of levels, but it's also anticipatory, right? Because not only are we feeling losses now, but we are anticipating more loss to come. And we don't know what that looks like, how big that will be, but we know that there will be something. So lots going on here. A lot of my clients are, and I'm sure you're experiencing this too, this sense of deep sadness, not just for how it's impacting them, but how it's impacting the world and population and other human beings in general. Like, we've never been in this place where we're doing this all together, experiencing this all together. So it's huge. It's huge.
Yeah. And I think that's a really valid point. Like, yes, there's been times in the past where we've experienced plague and other, things, or other collective experiences, but never once has it been all together as one big planetary. And my husband and I have been talking about this, just like, back then it was a lot slower for illness to travel. And now illness travels like this, like it just is so fast. And one of the things that you said about how the government piece, like how there's a loss of government showing, that sense of government showing up for us. And it makes me think of how in so many spiritual teachings, the Savior is not really out there. Like, the Savior is really in here.
Mm-hmm.
And what actions are we doing and what are we taking and how are we handling and doing our part? And that's what that makes me think of as you said that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So the other piece that you were talking about in terms of spiritual significance of all of this, I have no idea. Honestly, I don't know what it all means. You know, I've heard all kinds of things in terms of its punishment. It is, you know, Mother Earth punishing us for, you know, having treated her poorly, right? And if we're not going to take care of her, she's going to do it herself, right? You know, I've seen memes, you know, saying things like, you know, it's like the universe has sent us to our rooms to make us think about what we've done, right? Like, you know, I've seen stuff like that. I've heard things in terms of, you know, God punishing the Western world, you know, for whatever wrongs that they have committed. But you know, I don't know. I don't know if any tragedy or any kind of evil has any spiritual significance. It kind of, for me, the way I see it is that it just is, right? And what we choose to take out of it as far as our resilience, that is the thing that, like you said, gives us spiritual significance. It gives us power to kind of transcend, you know, like this chaotic evil almost that has no rhyme or reason to it. So yeah, spiritual significance, I don't know, you got to talk to God about that. Like I you know, I can't even begin to consider what those possibilities might be, and I'm not sure that it's helpful. Right.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that it's helpful.
Yeah, and I appreciate what you're sharing about some of what you're hearing in terms of, you know, we're being punished. And for me, because I actually, the way I've learned a lot about spirituality is through A Course in Miracles and a lot of the teachings of Marianne Williamson. I adore her, and she has definitely been one of the teachers on my spiritual path, and also cultivating that intimate personal relationship with a God of my understanding, you know? And for me, I've had to work really hard in my personal spirituality to come away from a punishing God and into a God that's more loving. And so from my perspective, you know, I don't believe that we're being punished at all. And I think when I was asking about that question of spiritual significance, it was, I love the way you answered it. And there's also this piece about just the season that we're in, how everything has been dead over the winter, at least here in the Northern Hemisphere. That's what I'm referring to in the seasons, right? Like things have been resting. And now all of a sudden things are going to be reborn again, you know, and we're already seeing it out here in California, like all the leaves are starting to come back in and the flowers and whatnot. And just thinking about how Easter is a time, and I know that you can speak to this way better than I can, because I don't know so much about Easter other than it's a time where there was the 3 days and then being reborn again in a new form. And that's where I was wondering, like, oh wow, like we're kind of in this very extended 3 days almost right now, to come out with a different perspective and a different vision.
This whole idea of dying and then being reborn, you know, that's probably one of the biggest changes that any individual can make. And you know, I don't know how other people feel about this, but I kind of feel like the world is going through that it is dying to some ideologies and ways of being with one another as a community and humanity that wasn't working, right? It just wasn't working. And I just find it really interesting that we are at home, isolated, right? And what is the thing that we miss? We miss being in community and touching people and being close to people and talking to them. And because this is the question I get the most, right? I cannot hug my child. I can't hug my grandparents. I can't sit and eat with them. And I can't, and you can do all those things virtually, but it doesn't have the same quality to it, right? Like I am hearing a lot about skin hunger now, right? Like I just need a hug, especially from people who are at home by themselves. And I just find it interesting that even though we have all this technology to stay connected, we are feeling the loss of not being connected, and kind of hungry for that and desperate for that. So I just kind of feel like there's going to be a huge change. Like I truly believe that we are all connected, and if one of us is hurt, it hurts the whole community. And it's almost as if the situation is making that very real. Like, because a lot of us, we're going to get sick, but a lot of us are not going to be part of the 1% that, get really, really sick, right? But a lot of us are staying home. Why? To protect other people, because our behavior and who we are and what we do and what we choose to do impacts other people, right? So there's this collectivity and community sense that is really, I think, going to transform, or I'm hoping that it will transform, how we do being in the world together.
Yeah, you and me both. Fingers crossed that we really do come through this. And exactly what you just named is a way that I've been viewing this time that we're in right now. Like this really is a time of going in. And as you were speaking, I just thought of circling it back around to grief, because I know in my personal journey and in the clients' journeys that I work with, there comes a point where we have to grieve the old way of being. Like the old who I was, my old identity. And it's almost like a part of the grief is also the grieving of the way things had been, as we're ready to step in and embrace, hopefully fingers crossed, the new reality that's going to come when we emerge from this, when we are reborn from this experience. And just the words that are coming is like when we go through the birthing of this new reality for us and ourselves. And for me, I think it's important that we allow ourselves, and this is for our viewers and our listeners right now, really just allowing ourselves to hold space for all the feels, whatever the feels might be, whether it's grief or loss or sadness or relief because someone's finally paying attention, like to the things that you've been thinking all along or whatever, and just allowing yourself to experience all the feels. And Mineela, if you were going to leave our listeners and our viewers with something for them as they're in this time, what would you leave them with?
I think it's going to sound trite and really simple and all of that, but I really do believe this. I think no matter what happens, right, it's going to be okay. Like it really will. It's going to be okay. It's not going to be easy to get to that okay, but everything's going to work itself out, and we will figure this out, and we will do what we need to do, because humanity has always survived, and move forward regardless of what has happened, and it's going to be okay.
Yeah, and I love that because it makes me think of something that my husband and I had talked about before we even got married, and it was this idea that humanity's been here before, and the earth knows what it needs to do to take care of itself. This wouldn't be the first time something like this has occurred, and
Right.
we will make it through. And each time that this has occurred in the history of evolution and in the history of the earth and
Right.
us as a humanity, like we always emerge differently. So I love that reminder of we will get through this. And in the meantime, just being able to honor all the feels. And if that means you're gonna take a time out to go stomp your feet and have a temper tantrum outside in the backyard, or if you're gonna scream into your pillow, or if you're gonna like just do a happy dance because someone is finally paying attention to every unsustainable thing that we've been doing recently, then just honor all of it and know that it's okay. You might vary from moment to moment and breath to breath might bring a different experience, and that all of it's okay.
Yeah. Well, different stages of grief, right? We are kind of ping-ponging and pinballing around, and anger and relief and bargaining and denial and all of that stuff, and that can happen in minutes, right? I had my ugly cry. I had my ugly cry on Sunday night, that snotty, messy, like sobbing kind of cry.
Yeah.
And then I woke up this morning and I was like, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. It really is. And I can't guarantee that I will not have that ugly cry again, because I probably will. But that feeling of it's going to be okay is there too. It all sits together.
Yeah. And I think that's what happens when we allow ourselves to hold space for all of it, that ultimately eventually we come through. And maybe another interesting little factoid, and then we start wrapping it up. But I was on Terry Real's RLT Advanced Level 3 training this weekend, relational life therapy, and we had a neuro specialist, someone who had a specialty in neurobiology. She was on the training as well. And she shared this piece of information about like the neural networks and the integration, like brain wholeness, basically. And that brain wholeness and brain maturity comes when we are able to hold the experience of two not seemingly opposite things, but just all of it, and from a spiritual perspective, I've always, not always, but as I've been cultivating my spiritual practice, I've known that we can hold the space for the and. Like I can have the ugly cry and still come out of it knowing it's going to be okay. Yeah. And when I'm holding that space for all of it, now there's research that shows that's our brain coming into integration of wholeness. And I just wanted to share that for anyone who might be having judgment around having all the different feels. This is good for the evolution of our brains.
Yes, it is. And it's interesting because when I talk to clients about that, the first word that they use is I feel relief. I feel relief that everything that I'm feeling makes sense. Right? Everything makes sense. It makes sense to be hopeful. It makes sense to be sad. It makes sense to be angry, and it all making sense together, right? Instead of picking and choosing, so that, you're not feeling shame and not feeling sadness and not feeling like you're doing it wrong. Right? Yeah, it just relief when you think about the fact that these are all coming from a reasonable place. We are all having very reasonable responses to a really extremely abnormal situation here.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's going to be okay.
Yes, it's going to be.
It really is. Yeah.
It really is. Anything else you'd like to share? I'm feeling complete. This feels really good, considering we're both talkers and could probably go on forever. And I want to honor that it's a brief conversation or brief-ish conversation with us. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think for anybody out there who is, kind of struggling or just needs one or two conversations, I would encourage you to find a therapist in your area. We are all online. You do not have to leave your home to come talk to us. And we are trained to hold all of this stuff, right? And not just hold all of their stuff, but to hold all our stuff too. And I think the unique thing about this is that we as therapists are going through exactly what you are going through, and we're all here to support you as much as possible by being in it with you.
Yeah.
So reach out to someone.
Yeah, beautiful. And with that, I'll just share, I know there's a number of resources right now for our frontline workers, healthcare, grocery stores, any of those essential frontline people. And I will make sure to have a link posted for anyone who might be in that category of people who need some support. And yeah, I love it. We are all virtual. We are all still here for you to hold space. And yeah, thank you for that really powerful message.
Now it feels complete for me too.
Beautiful. Well, thank you all so much for listening in and joining us as we have this conversation, and just remembering that together we will make it. And with that, so much love to you all. Thank you for joining, and until next time.